Welcome back, everyone. Today is going to be the day that we transfer this drawing and start the underpainting. So I'm going to be using just regular tracing paper. So again, if you want to know exactly what materials I'll be using for this painting, you can always go ahead and scroll down to the description box below and I'll have all that information typed up for you. So the first thing to do is going to be to just get some tape. So this is just regular old painter's tape, and put it over top of the drawing. And you can use whatever type of pencil you'd like, but I'm going to go ahead and use a burnt umber colored pastel pencil. I don't know, I really like using this color for this task, so I'm going to go ahead and just outline all of the shapes from the drawing. So upon closer inspection, I'm noticing that there could be yet another problem with the mouth. I'm just looking at this distance here, from the nostril down to the corner of the mouth. And I think that perhaps the mouth could probably move up this much, super tiny bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to rely on the drawing underneath of the transfer paper, but we're going to correct it basically on the transfer paper. So we're going to take the information presented in front of us and just work with it. So we're going to move, so this is the angle of the mouth, we're going to move the mouth up. So here's where the mouth used to be, the corner of the mouth, and we're going to move it up ever so slightly. So here's the center of the mouth. Let's make sure that these two shapes relate to one another. So this is another benefit, major benefit of this process, the transfer drawing. Just being able to see the outlines afresh kind of allows me another objective eye. So see that we've moved the shape of the mouth up a little bit. Here's the cast shadow of the mouth. And so we're going to move, okay, so here's the bottom of the mouth. So we just moved it up a tiny bit. And hopefully that'll be enough. I was just looking at basically the corner of the nostril here to the mouth. Now again, all of these decisions are being made optically, and I'm sure you're wondering why I wouldn't just trace the photograph. And really, I'm trying to convey the interpretation, my own interpretation of the model. And so instead of copying what I'm looking at, I'm actually observing this distance. So instead of just a perfect outline, I'm observing basically the structure encompassing the mouth kind of shifting upwards, as opposed to just looking at the outline and tracing it out. So here's the cast shadow of the lips. Here's the boundary of the bottom of the lip. Cast shadow here. Now moving the mouth up does have a consequence with these outlines. So let's just make sure that these outlines can communicate with the corner of the mouth. So this shape comes out to here. And again, just dropping a vertical from the root of the nose should land at the center of the lips. So let's just make sure that these 2 points relate to one another, the root of the nose to the middle of the mouth, and of course the middle of the upper lip here. And they seem to be working just fine. So again, it's a whole new day, and I'm just basically seeing the entire outline afresh again. A very useful thing. So here's the little shape for the chin. So basically, what I'm going to do next is just flip this over and just add some pigment to the back of the transfer paper. But first, I just want to make sure that I have all the outlines mapped out that I want to transfer onto the panel. I think that's about all right. Maybe I would want a little bit of information here for the corner of the wing of the nose. And I think that's about good. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it. So just going to put basically some pastel. I'm going to rub some pastel on the back of the transfer drawing. And you don't want to do this on top of your drawing. Notice I took the drawing away. And you don't want to do this on top of your drawing because you could accidentally transfer some of the transfer drawing back onto your original drawing. So now I'm going to take the paper and flip it over. So now I put the transfer paper onto the panel that I'm going to be painting on, and this is yet another very useful thing about transfer drawing. You really have the ultimate control over your composition. I got to choose basically exactly where I wanted to place the image. So the next thing I'm going to do is just go over the outlines with a regular pen, and I'm going to be kind of cautious not to rest my hand on any of the areas where the pastel is underneath. Just a regular old pen. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. So after tracing over the drawing, we're going to just take off the transfer paper. And this is also one of my favorite parts because you never really know what's underneath until you take this off. It's almost like receiving a birthday present. And there we go. That is the transfer. And for those of you that might be curious as to how I set up my palette, that's all I do. All right, so now I'm going to get some paint. So we're going to start off the underpainting with a posterized image. Might not even need titanium white at this point, but I'm just going to take it out. So titanium white and burnt umber. So we're going to refer to this step as the posterized image, and that is, we're just going to focus on mainly two tones for the start of the underpainting. So I'm going to take a palette knife, since I don't want to use straight up burnt umber, because that'll get really dark really fast. Let's go ahead and just mix a tiny bit of titanium white with the burnt umber. And I'm going to thin out the paint a little bit with a paint thinner. A new one that I've actually started using just because it has a fast drying property, at least faster drying property than just regular odorless mineral spirits. And that's called Essence of Citrus. Citrus Essence, that's what it's called. And again, if you want to know exactly what materials I'm using, you can go ahead and scroll down to the description box below, and I'll have all that typed out for you. So basically, Citrus Essence is it's supposed to be a non-toxic, kind of a non-toxic replacement to odorless mineral spirits, but I didn't purchase it for that reason. I purchased it because a friend of mine used spike lavender instead of regular old odorless mineral spirits, and the spike lavender would have this fast drying property I really liked. And I wanted to get the spike lavender, but on Amazon it was sold out at that point. So I just went with the citrus version of the spike lavender. So that's a pretty good mixture, I guess. So I've been using it for a while, the citrus essence, and it's in this little jar down here directly beneath the shot. So I'm just going to thin out the paint with it a little bit, and the citrus essence, basically it works just like regular odorless mineral spirits, except it's not odorless. It smells like citrus. So my studio smells like citrus now, which I don't really mind too much. So the next thing to do is going to be to go over the outlines again very carefully. So it's thinning out the paint a little bit. So this is kind of the tortoise and the hare kind of thing. So basically, I used to hear this term back when I was in school, that better is faster. Not necessarily to say that any one thing is better, but spending your time with the drawing and then the posterized image for your underpainting is going to be essential to the development of the portrait. Now, I'm not trying to perfectly copy the photograph, and you know that because I say that all the time, but it is important to understand the basic concepts of form, color, and perspective. And basically, we're kind of breaking this down into kind of a threefold process: shape, value, color. So we're going to focus on the shape aspect. So we're going over these lines very carefully now, with the spike, not spike lavender, I'm going to want to say spike now, but with the citrus thinner. How about we just call it the thinner? Yeah, let's just refer to it as the thinner. So very carefully going over the lines, and I really want to establish the posterized image and make it as strong as possible. So basically just the shapes of light and dark. And at this point, I'm not even filling in the shapes. I'm just establishing the boundary between them. I don't know why I just dipped into the burnt umber. I already have this mixture mixed up, but oh well. Now, this can slip out of hand very quickly. So you gotta be very careful. Takes a little bit of patience, but not too much. Trust me, there are things that take much more patience than this. Almost like an ink line, we're going over that. Now, something I have to be very mindful about is the height to width ratios, and I think that perhaps the zygomatic bone here, this cheekbone here, I must be careful with that shape. It's very easy to make this too wide. And so right here there is a very definitive relationship between the side of the mouth and the side of the zygomatic region, so I gotta be very mindful of that. So again, the tear duct. Remember the tear duct. Remember this angle? That was Tuesday's video, correcting that angle. So let's make sure not to lose it. But it's not the end of the world. Here's the secret. I'm going to tell you something. So if you look at a lot of old master paintings, if you look at a lot of Sargent, if you look at a lot of Bouguereau, if you look at a lot of Caravaggio, Rembrandt, did I say Rembrandt already? If you look at a lot of old master paintings, their drawing is extremely well developed. And their color varies dramatically, especially if you look at, I don't know, if you look at a Sargent and then you look at a Rembrandt, a Caravaggio, if you look at a Bouguereau, their drawings are very, very precise. Even someone like Sargent that tried to make his work look very fresh, very like it was done all in one sitting. His drawing ability was incredible. He was definitely someone that worked hard on it, worked hard into it every day. Now, the difference between all of these artists, the main difference really is their color. And I'm just telling you these stories as I'm filling in the outlines, just so I don't bore you with the filling in the outlines part. But basically, what I want to get at is that drawing is really the secret to painting. But there's another thing. You don't have to draw the model exactly like the model is. So you don't have to get a perfect photographic rendition of the model. Now, if you look at a simple Rembrandt, not that his paintings are simple, but if you look at a Rembrandt, you will see, I don't want to say the word stylized, but there's a little bit of himself in the paintings, in the portraits. There's a little bit of himself in it, and that you can tell it's a Rembrandt. He didn't just look at something, now I can't speak for the artist because, you know, I didn't live back then, but you can tell that there's something of the artist within the work. And so you can allow yourself that freedom of not having to perfectly copy the image in front of you. Instead, take in the visual information, interpret it, and create works that are unique to you. All of you have something unique to the way you see things. We all see the same stuff, but we all interpret it differently. So that's what I'm trying to get at. You don't have to get everything right. You don't have to get everything right like a perfectly photographic rendition. Understanding the concepts of shape, value, color, anatomy, and form painting, form drawing will help you establish basically your own touch, your own unique way of representing the world. That's the beauty of representational art. Is that we don't all have to paint the same exact thing, the same exact way. Not to say that I'm not focused on the drawing, it's just that I know that certain elements of my own personality might come out within the artwork, and that's okay. So we're closing in now on the outlines. I'm going to thin out the paint a little bit more using the thinner. And when you're doing a process like this, make sure to keep your transfer drawing somewhere near you, very close to you while you're working. It's going to be very beneficial to keep that drawing around you, just so you can keep referring to it. Why do I keep going into this burnt umber? I don't need it. So I'm going to thin it out again. So essentially, you don't have to paint or draw exactly what's in front of you. As long as you know the essential concepts of form, value, color, anatomy, structure, structural drawing, structural painting, you will create beautiful works of art. I promise you. And I think a good one to look at for that is, a really good one to look at is a Bouguereau. Take a second to look at a Bouguereau. Look at it close up and you'll see it's not a perfectly photographic image. Let's go ahead and just cover this now. So I'm going to take the palette knife again and mix up another value. What are we going to mix it? I guess let's mix it over here. So titanium. So I want a value a little lighter than that. I don't want it to be too light, but just a little bit lighter than that. And we're going to use this now for the in between, basically for these little in between values. So I'm thinking that I want to establish the entire posterized image, so just the light and the dark, and then I'll probably just let it dry for the next day and then get into values. So let's see, let's test that one out. Excuse me. So I'm going to dilute the paint a little bit, so I'm just cleaning off the brush with the thinner. So let's take this value. Now I don't want this to be the value for the underpainting. I just want this to be a value to differentiate the light from the dark. And I think that that's almost there. I think maybe a little darker. Now the reason that I want it to be lighter than this, is so that I don't lose the boundary between the lines. And mixing with a palette knife just allows me to have a larger area on the palette that has the exact value that I want. That's a little better. So now we're basically going to be filling in the darks with this value. And don't be confused with the value and think that that's going to be the final value that I'm going to want for the dark shapes. It's just a value to fill in. And again, this is more of a procedural thing right now. It's not really, I'm not introducing any new information into the drawing or the painting. I'm just filling in the darks. I'm also looking at my drawing now, just so I can fill in the darks. And I know that there's a darker value for the eyebrow, but I'm going to just keep that unified. I think I'm going to keep that unified. And again, the thinner that I'm using, like I mentioned before, has it has a property that allows it to dry faster than conventional mineral spirits. So now you can see the posterized image is starting to emerge. This alleviates kind of the difficulty in trying to work over top of just outlines alone. Now you can do that, and I'm pretty sure I've done that in a video or so, but having this boundary between light and dark really does help. Take it from me, I've found this to be very, very beneficial. And another tricky thing is to know the ratio of thinner to apply to the brush. Now if I had too much thinner, it would just start dripping down. If I had too little, it wouldn't really stick that well. So there's kind of a little, you'll feel it out. Something that is a matter of feel, I think. Want to make sure that I don't make this shape too wide. That's just one of my tendencies one of my tendencies is to widen, trying to fight that tendency. So it's a little more mineral spirits. Whoops, there we go again, mixing them up. With a little more thinner. I'm going to go ahead and just put a thicker boundary here. Very carefully so that I don't lose the differentiation between the light and the dark. See how it just flows now? I added a little more mineral spirits. Much better. So there's actually a little shape here that I didn't notice. I guess I didn't notice it in the drawing. Comes out a little bit like that. So now for the hair, I'm gonna use maybe this one. So I'm going to use a different brush, apply a little more thinner. If it starts to drip on the palette, that's a clear sign that it's too thin. And that looks all right. And I want to make sure to keep myself at an arm's length away. We see things a little differently when it's just line, when it's just a linear construct, I find. It really does start to emerge, it really does start to take form once we add a value to it, once there's light and shadow. So keeping myself at a pretty far distance behind while I do this helps me to analyze exactly what I'm looking at. And I'm just kind of scrubbing the paint in there. Let's go ahead and just put some of that even into this shadow here. Very carefully now. I'm going to use the fan brush just to eliminate some glare. Now I think one of the last things I'll do for the posterized image is just address the dark light. The dark light, some of you may know, is the darkest value in the light just before light transitions into shadow. And the reason I'm going to address that value right now is not for any rendering purposes, but rather I'm going to use it to add a little bit more specificity into the boundary between light and dark. So I'm going to use it kind of more as a drawing tool than a rendering tool. So I'm not trying to render anything here, just trying to address the specificity between the shapes of light and shadow. And in particular here, this is too simple of a, like, almost like a perfect curve at the bottom of the nose. So I'm going to use the same brush. Just going to clean it off a little bit with the thinner. hopefully this value is not too light. We'll see. Sorry, I'm moving the canvas, or sorry, I'm moving the panel. Okay, now let's take a look at this shape. And it is a little too light. Whoops, I just want it to be a little lighter than that, so a little more burnt umber won't hurt. And I just want to use this again to add a little bit more variance to the boundary between light and dark. There we go. That's the value that I want. So that is going to add a little bit of variation. See that the bulb of the nose needs to pull down just a little bit there. Just a little tiny adjustment. And then over here, it's a little more flat like that. And let's take a little risk here. So let's try and put a little bit of information here for the halftone here. Taking a big risk with that. I don't think that that's even necessary right now. I'm going to make it very light, so I'm subtracting some of it with a little bit of paper towel. That's not necessary at this point, but you know. Alright, so now here there's a little flare, I don't know, a little swoop that I didn't indicate while tracing the image, and I also kind of see it in my drawing. And let's even put that tone over here. And over here. There's actually a little bit of dog hair that was on the on the panel when I was gessoing it. I didn't notice, so there's going to be a dog hair there. Thank you, Mr. Taco. And in case you don't know who that is, Mr. Taco is my Chihuahua, and he's featured in one of my portrait painting videos. Painted a portrait of him a while ago. I think that video is titled Portrait of a Chihuahua or something. So basically I just flatten this out, so flat, angle up, turns into the eye. Now here, same kind of thing, flat, or sorry, this is angling up towards the eye, flat over here. See that? And also a little bit over here too, there's actually a little bit of specificity to that shape for the concavity of the eye socket that I didn't indicate before. Little tiny things. Now we're going to just use this for the upper lip, because this is going to be a very distinct dark light, or sorry, very distinct halftone for the lips. And again, this isn't for the purpose of rendering. This is just for the purpose of specificity between the light and dark shapes. Those of you that like realism paintings that are reminiscent of nature, this is the way. This is one of the many ways to achieve it. Making sure that the separation between light and dark is as exacting as possible. And I did just instinctively go for the darker dark. I'm sorry, I didn't need to do that, but my instinct was like, make that darker, so I made it darker. Oh well, let's just do that. So there's a dark light over here, basically communicating with the side of the lip here. So again, there's going to be a little swoop. Let's take some of this value here. A little swoop there. And again, the posterized image is extremely useful. for the rendering and the basically it's good for everything. Let's just put it that way. Takes patience, just a little bit of patience. But the result is a much stronger painting, much stronger result. So over here, there's actually, let's just make it a little bit darker. So there's a angle here. So it's angling a little further this way. And then as we go down, it starts to go like this, but it's very subtle. Very subtle. So we really want that kind of specificity. And that angle change is very slight. Angle between here and here. Super subtle. Incredibly subtle. And so subtle, in fact, that I don't even notice it myself. Maybe I didn't put in that change. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think it shows. So let's go ahead and try to subtract a little bit of this to create that angle. There we go. Just using paper towel. Gotta be careful not to accidentally put any paint into the light here. Now we're starting to see that little shape emerge. And over here as well. Just want to soften this. So there's some things I should mention that I edited, man, can't speak today. Some things that I edit out. So you can see in the image that there was a little bit of hair showing here. In the transfer drawing, I knew it was there. I just didn't I kind of didn't want it there. I don't know. It just didn't seem to go well. And the hair on the image is basically right next to the contour of the eye, and I didn't like that. Just in terms of aesthetic, I don't like when two things meet perfectly. I don't know why, to be honest. It's just in terms of my personal aesthetic, I don't like when things just meet perfectly. So that's why I left a little bit of the gap there, and then I kind of edit out that little shape of the hair. I don't know, I might put it in later, but not really a priority right now. So we're just going to make this a little darker. Just a little tiny change to that. So one last thing I'll do is just try to soften this outline. Very cautious not to lose the boundary between light and dark though. So I think that the poster is now, it's now at a good place to let it dry and then come back the next day, tomorrow, and start to get into values. Whoa, hold on, not yet. Missing, what happened here? It's like part of her chin is being pulled down. Yeah, I don't want that. No, thank you. I want this to be closer to level. Yeah, so you're going to be seeing a lot of stuff like this, the real life happenings in my studio. There we go. Who knows, maybe there's something else I'm missing in the poster, but that's all right. I think we have the foundation pretty well set to get into values, but of course I want this to dry, so I'll see you tomorrow.